St. Luke's Gospel contains several parables of Jesus that are not found in the other Gospels. And these stories, these parables, often present us with some very memorable characters. If we think about the ones we've just heard in the past few weeks, the father with the two sons, the Samaritan who rescues the victim of the robbers, and last Sunday, the widow who is ready to punch in the face the corrupt judge. Today, Jesus continues his teaching on prayer with another brief and yet memorable image, the Pharisee and the tax collector who go up to the temple to pray. And the usual explanation is, of course, that the Pharisee is a proud man and the tax collector is a humble man. And sometimes we Catholics like to joke that we live this parable by knowing that the only place you really should sit in church is as far back as you possibly can. But let's engage the story a little bit more and ask, what was the Pharisee so proud of? And what brought about the humility of the tax collector? Well, my image of the tax collector has become a lot more vivid due to the portrayal of Matthew in the video series, The Chosen. Matthew is depicted as a math genius, and as a young man, he decides to use this great talent he has to get himself a very good, secure job, which is to work for the Roman government. Now, by doing this, he alienates himself from his family and his friends and actually every other Jew in town. So Matthew now can live luxuriously. He has everything he could ever want, except he has no friends at all. Every day on his way to and from the office, the people in the town curse at him, spit at him, say all kinds of ugly things to him, and as a result, he has no place in the faith community and actually knows very little about his own Jewish tradition. And this would likely be true of the tax collector in today's gospel as well. Pushed away, avoided by everybody, and really he comes to the temple and really has nothing that he can offer to God. No wonder he stands far back in the corner, kind of hiding out. Now, the Pharisees, on the other hand, were the most devout of the Jews. And they were not priests, but they were lay people who wanted to imitate the holiness that they saw in the temple and in the offerings, the sacrifices and celebrations that went on there by the priesthood. And they wanted to bring that holiness, that sense of God, back into their own homes. We today would call it learning to discover God in our daily lives, feeling the presence of God in everyday life. And the Pharisees went far beyond what Moses required, as we heard in the story today. Moses did not require fasting more than, say, maybe once a year or so, and the Pharisees fasted twice a week because they were so zealous for the law. No wonder then this individual Pharisee today in the gospel stands before God and says, you know, I love you a lot and I do all these wonderful things. I thank you for setting me apart and favoring me with so much grace and so much religious knowledge and understanding. So in a sense, the Pharisee came to the temple, he already had it all. And that's basically then what he went home with. Nothing more than he came to the temple with. The tax man, of course, had nothing of this. All he had was the sense of how far away he was from God, what a mess he had made of his life, and at the end of the day, realizing that all his wealth brought him no happiness at all, but only misery. And so from his emptiness, he prays for mercy. And Jesus says it was then this man, not the Pharisee, who left the temple really a new man, filled with the peace of God, filled with an awareness of God's mercy. Jesus in Matthew's gospel says, "Blessed, happy, joyful are those who are poor in spirit," like the tax collector in today's gospel. But for a moment also, let us recall how Luke expresses this same idea. We have read already long before, months ago, we read Luke's version of the Beatitudes, and Luke has Jesus saying, "Blessed are the poor, and woe to those who are rich." And so, although today's parable is a teaching on prayer, it's also about how we approach God, and also how we look at our lifestyle, the things we own, the things we have. We know that authentic prayer leads us into action. Now, I can't read his mind, of course, I wasn't there, but perhaps the tax collector went home with a whole new understanding of the meaning of life and also a new approach to his own possessions. Perhaps he adopted a new lifestyle, one of compassion for the poor and of generosity, of becoming as merciful to others as God was merciful to him. Now, wouldn't this new freedom and his willingness to walk with the poor rather than over them become a bit of good news that the neighborhood would be talking about, this change that we see in this man? And could it be possible also that this tax collector also knew a tax collector we're going to meet next Sunday, a man named Zacchaeus who climbed up in a tree to see what this Jesus was all about? Maybe it was his curiosity about Jesus that was sparked by today's tax collector's change of heart. How is God leading us then to be people who walk with the poor? How is God leading us this week to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God? How is God inviting us this week to return the favor of God's mercy to us by being people of mercy and love to one another? In this way, we too will become good news, and we will be the living gospel for others to hear.